So, last time, we covered what the role of ethics was in society. Now, let's move on to the next lesson. Metaethics, the foundation of moral thought. We previously examined the role of moral norms, institutions, and individual responsibility. But now, we step back from what we ought to do and ask a more fundamental question. What do we mean when we say something is right or wrong? Are moral judgments facts, feelings, or something else entirely? That is metaethics, the branch of ethics that investigates the nature, meaning, and justification of moral language and judgment. Metaethics is not about deciding whether lying is wrong. That's normative ethics. Instead, metaethics asks, what is lying? What kind of statement is lying is wrong? Does it describe reality? Does it express emotion? Or does it command action? So, let's elaborate a bit more on that. What is metaethics really? Metaethics is the philosophical study of the foundations of ethics. It asks questions about the status and meaning of moral claims. Unlike normative ethics, which tells us how we ought to act, metaethics will ask, what are moral statements? Are moral truths objective or subjective? How can we know what is right or wrong? Do moral facts exist at all? I know this might sound complicated, but let's think of it this way. It's like asking, is the sky is blue a factual statement? But instead, we're asking, is stealing is wrong a factual statement? This may seem abstract, but it's essential. Because if we don't understand what moral language means, we can't properly evaluate moral arguments. Now, what are some of the central questions of metaethics? There's a few, but we'll focus on 4 of them. 1. What is the nature of moral language? Are moral statements descriptive, like, the sky is blue, or prescriptive, like, you should stop smoking? This leads to a key distinction. There's cognitivism. Moral statements express beliefs that can be true or false. For example, murder is wrong is a belief that can be justified or falsified. Then you have non-cognitivism. Moral statements do not express beliefs, but instead express emotions, attitudes, or commands. For example, a cognitivist might say, it's wrong to lie, means lying causes harm, and harm is bad. While a non-cognitivist might say, it's wrong to lie is just a way of saying I disapprove of lying or don't lie. This distinction is crucial because it determines whether moral disagreements can be resolved through reason or if they're just expressions of personal taste. Question 2. Are moral facts objective? This would be moral realism versus anti-realism. This is one of the most profound debates in metaethics. Moral realism holds that moral facts exist independently of human beliefs or feelings. Just as there are scientific facts, like water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, there are moral facts. For example, torturing the innocents is wrong. Moral truths are discoverable through reason, not invented by something like culture or emotion. Now, moral anti-realism denies that moral facts exist. Moral statements are not about objective truths. Instead, they are about subjective feelings. For example, I feel that lying is wrong. You have social conventions. For example, we agree that lying is bad. And emotional expressions, such as lying is bad. This includes views like moral relativism, that truth depends on culture, and something known as error theory, that all moral statements are false because no moral facts exist. The debate between realism and anti-realism is central to metaethics. If moral facts don't exist, then ethics becomes a matter of preference, not truth. So question 3. How do we know what is right or wrong? This would be the epistemology of ethics. Even if moral facts exist, how do we know them? Moral institutionism. So we have a moral faculty, like a moral sense that allows us to perceive moral truths directly. Then we have rationalist views. We can use reason to deduce moral principles. There's empirical views, where we learn moral values through experience, education, and socialization. But if there are no moral facts, then knowledge of morality becomes impossible, or at least not like scientific knowledge. Let's look at some major meta-ethical theories real quick. So some of the main positions in metaethics are emotivism, which is moral statements express emotions rather than facts. Stealing is wrong means I disapprove of stealing. Moral language is expressive, not truth apt. For example, when someone says capital punishment is wrong, they're not stating a fact. They're expressing disapproval and trying to influence others to feel the same. Next, we have subjectivism. Moral truths depend on individual attitudes. This is wrong means I disapprove of this. Different people can have different moral views. No objective right or wrong. A limitation of this is if morality is entirely subjective, then no one can be wrong, which makes moral disagreements meaningless. Cultural relativism. Moral truths depend on cultural norms. So-and-so is wrong means so-and-so violates the values of my society. What's right in one culture may be wrong in another. For example, in some cultures, polygamy is acceptable. In others, it's not. Is one right and the other wrong? Now, a critique of this specific stance is that this view can justify harmful practices. A very extreme example of this would be female genital mutilation, if they are culturally accepted. And then we have moral realism. In other words, divine command theory and naturalism. Moral facts exist and are objective. Divine command theory states that moral truths are based on God's will, while with naturalism, moral truths are grounded in human nature or well-being. For example, harm is wrong because it violates human flourishing. And question 4, why does metaethics matter? You might ask, why should we care about these abstract questions? Because the answers shape how we think about ethics. If moral truths are subjective, then moral progress is possible. We can argue that slavery was wrong, even if most people believed it was right at the time. If moral truths are subjective, then moral disagreements become expressions of taste, like arguing over whether chocolate is better than vanilla. If moral statements are just expressions of emotion, then moral reasoning becomes a matter of persuasion, not truth. Metaethics, therefore, is not just philosophy for philosophers. It affects how we justify laws, judge moral progress, respond to cultural differences, and engage in moral dialogue. So, in conclusion, we've explored metaethics, the study of the nature, meaning, and justification of moral judgments. We've also asked, what do we mean when we say something is right or wrong? Are moral statements factual, emotional, or social? Do moral truths exist independently of us? These are not easy questions, but they are essential for understanding the foundation of ethics.